Greetings, everyone. I'm Roger Dinwiddie, and this is Matt Gress with STARS, and we are thrilled to be with you today. We've been so sorry that we couldn't find a way to get in person over the course of the last many months. So we're looking forward to sharing with you all a video about bullying prevention. And Matt and I want to claim on the front end that we are not experts in the field of autism. What we are, though, is we're really good around the issue of bullying. And so that's what we're going to share with you all today is a look at bullying and its impact on both autism in the school environment as well as in the work environment. So that's what we're sharing today. We'll go back and forth. This is going to be very casual in terms of its implementation today. So bear with us as we pull up some slides to make sure you can see them. And one of our wonderful colleagues, our co-CEO at STARS, Sandy Small's on here, and she's going to make sure we're all good to go and we'll get rolling. So let me share screen and make sure everything's working well. Sandy, can you see us?
Yes, but put your slides in presentation mode. I can see all the slides.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right, thanks, Sandy. Appreciate it.
All right. The only issue, I think it might still be in presentation mode because I can still see your slide in addition to the next slide and notes.
How about now?
Same.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Thanks, Sandy. All right. Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. We appreciate that. Little technical issues here, as always. So, as you can see here, the title of the session today is this is not that much different between bullying in the workplace and bullying in the school environment for young people and adults as well. So, our goal today, Matt and I are sharing this with the hopes that we can help your children and also those of you in the workplace really feel safe, connected, and confident about dealing with this particularly complex issue.
Yeah, and I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit about what I do so you know where I'm coming from. So I've been with STARS over 25 years and I've worked with every age group from kindergarten all the way up to kids graduating high school. Right now I'm serving a K through 8 school, a middle school, and a high school. So I kind of see bullying on all the different areas and all the different time frames. And so I come across this issue so often in the schools, and so that's why I felt like it was important for me to share my perspective because it's something I deal with on a daily basis. And I think the best way to start is to see how much do we all know about bullying, because I think a lot of times we think we know things and we kind of have misinformation. So we're going to do this very quickly, but I'm going to go through as if you're sitting in front of me. So take a minute if you want to have a little sketch pad or something and jot down your answers as you go and see if you get these right. So number one, true or false? These are just 8 true and false questions. Studies suggest that fewer than 10% of children are involved in bullying problems in elementary, middle, or high school. That's actually false. When you look at kids that are bullied, as well as students that engage in bullying, it's actually higher than 10%. And then we look at number 2, students are more likely to be bullied in high school than in elementary or middle school. Again, false. Actually, things subside a bit in high school and they peak around 5th grade. But of course, anybody that works in a middle school knows, or has a child in middle school knows, man, it is definitely present there. But it is the younger grades, and that's why it's so important for us to do prevention work in the schools and work with our elementary and middle school teachers. All right, number 3, most bullying is physical in nature. False. Actually, most bullying takes place verbally, it takes place online, it takes place in all the digital formats and texting, and a lot of that in-person stuff that's kind of repeated over time but intended to harm other kids. And we'll get to that definition here in a second, but the physical bullying also takes place. We don't want to diminish that, but we don't. But the purpose of that question is to show that actually bullying takes all different forms. All right, number 4. Girls are more likely than boys to bully others. That is false. Girls do obviously bully each other and even some boys, especially in younger grades, but boys are still more likely to bully than girls. All right, you're probably catching on, but we're going to keep going here. Number 5, in recent years, cyberbullying has become one of the most common forms of bullying among students. That is still false. Yes, I know cyberbullying's in our face because it has a different presence. Online seems to be always there. And so something that maybe took place a couple of weeks ago seems like it's still ongoing because it still exists. And of course, cyber stuff and kids live online. But most bullying still takes place in person. I think those numbers are certainly increasing, and we see it more often, but it's still that one-on-one stuff, the stuff we see every single day within our classrooms, in the hallways, on the bus, everywhere. Number 6, the vast majority of students who are bullied tell a teacher or other member of the school staff. This one's a strong false. And we'll get into a little bit later who students normally do report to, and it's actually usually a peer first or their parents. So they get reported at home, but they still do not tell teachers or a member of the school staff first. And we'll go into some of the reasons for that as well. But no, they do not report. In fact, people don't report in general as much as they should. For obvious reasons, for a lot of different reasons. Number 7, bullying is just as likely on the way to and from school as during school hours. You might have guessed it's false again. And it does take place on buses and on bus stops and all of that. But again, I'm just emphasizing most bullying takes place where they live, which is in the building, in the school, every single day. Think about it. That's what, 6, 7 hours of their life every single day. Or if they stay in after school programs and all that, it could be 10 hours. It's a big portion of their day and their life, and that's where it takes place. Finally, most students who observe bullying don't think they should get involved. This is one I want you to emphasize with your own children, because the answer to that is a strong false. In fact, most kids want to do something or think it's wrong. In fact, when we survey students, their perspective is, I don't like this. I don't want this to happen. More often, though, it's that they don't know what to do, or they're afraid to move, or they don't want to become the next target. And so that one, I really want that one to be one you share with your own family, with your own students. Awesome. So let me ask, what concerns you most about bullying and your child? Just take a second to think about that. What is it that concerns you the most? And I think, as parents or community members or teachers or whatever role you play in this whole, ecosystem of looking at all this, obviously the student safety, not just their physical safety, but their mental health safety, their emotional safety, their educational safety. There's some old statistics and old research that shows that if kids don't feel safe and secure and settled when they're at school, especially in the morning, they can't learn. And so I think the concerns we all have are across the board. I think it would go when Roger talks about workplace bullying.
It's the same thing.
It's the same exact thing. We're concerned about people feeling like, hey, I feel good in this place. I feel secure. I don't feel like I have to battle things or worry about what somebody might say or do.
Sure.
So great discussion question for you to have with your own people, your own community. And this is just a slide about these are some things that people do to stop bullying and all that. It kind of triggers what our discussion is going to be. And you can see here, bullying, a lot of kids doing some things themselves, but then in the workplace, it's the same thing. People hear the chattering. It's kind of, I love that woman's expression because it's basically noise. Bullying becomes background noise. And unfortunately, sometimes we get numb to it. We've been doing bullying prevention work for so many years. I see this in schools all the time, Roger, that, and I know you do too, that people kind of ignore it sometimes because it's just kind of background noise, but it's not background noise to that one person that it's happening to. So let's look at a definition. This was from Alveus, which Alveus is a program that's we are very heavily involved with. It's just a bullying prevention program that has, man, decades and decades of research, and they have really good material if you want to look some stuff up. But one of their definitions is that it's intentional, aggressive behavior that involves this is the important part here, an imbalance of power between a student who bullies and those that they target. So, bullying has to involve a sort of imbalance of power. One person has more power than the other person. That doesn't mean they're bigger or physically stronger. It could, but it just means that maybe they have more status, or they're just more aggressive in their personality. And the other person has a difficult time defending themselves. Maybe because they have fewer friends, or they're new to the school, or whatever that reason is. Or in what we're talking about today, maybe they have something that makes them feel different in some way.
Yep.
And so there's an intentional is important here too, aggressive behavior that involves an imbalance of power. You notice too, we don't use the word victim here.
Yes.
We don't use the word bully all the time, because we don't label students, especially when they're younger, that, oh, you're a bully or you're the bullied victim. We talk about students that are targets of bullying, or kids that are bullying. Cyberbullying is the same definition, but it's with the willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, electronic devices. Obviously, in today's world, it's all about that phone, right? That's where they watch their entertainment. That's where all of this happens. So the three areas, again, I kind of emphasized it there a minute ago, but we want to put it on a slide so you see it. It involves an aggressive behavior. It typically involves a pattern of behavior repeated over time, and an imbalance of power or strength. The repeated part is important because sometimes we mistake conflicts or a bad day with bullying. And just because a kid calls another kid a name one day, that is a bullying behavior, but that doesn't necessarily fall under a pattern of bullying. It could be two students that were having an issue that day. Okay, so what does it look like? Physical bullying, it's the things we can see. Physical bullying is so much easier to see because it's in front of us, right? Hitting, pushing, property destruction. I think about, we used to have some slides that talked about even stealing, like taking somebody's lunch money, or taking something from them, or destroying their books, or throwing something on the floor. Verbal bullying, name calling, mocking, threats. Social and relational bullying. This is one that I see very often, especially in middle school. I see this quite a bit. It's that exclusion, intentional exclusion, rumors, and intentional isolation. That's different than, well, we just don't like that kid, so we don't hang out with them. That's a normal, thing that happens. Relational. We're not all close to each other. But when somebody or a group of people intentionally exclude a child, purposely, with the intention of isolating them. And of course, cyberbullying, mean text, social media harassment, fake accounts. Gosh, we see that. Oh my God. Yeah, and now we're having the deep fakes and all of the stuff, and all the AI stuff. And of course, group chat exclusion. So this is what I've been discussing, the difference between conflict and bullying. So in conflict, there's equal power. In bullying, there's a power imbalance. In conflict, it might be occasional or one time. In bullying, it's repeated. In conflict, both contribute, and the other one targets another under bullying. In conflict, there's disagreements. There's things we just don't maybe like about each other, or we don't like something somebody said, or there's a disagreement on whatever issue. The bullying has an intent to harm. I do want to take 1 second and say, bullying can take place, bullying behaviors, when somebody maybe didn't intend it to be that way, that somebody feels that way. Right. And we still have to deal with that in the same way, because the repercussions are the same. But in general.
Just because conflict happens doesn't mean it automatically doesn't mean that bullying can't result from the conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's that, and also Matt's going to talk about this in just a little bit too. Sometimes young people with autism have a very difficult time determining the difference between conflict and bullying. Absolutely. So Matt's going to add a bunch more about that.
Yeah, with the social cues and
Yep,
all of that.
yep.
So there are physical signs. This is real. I want us to really, as you're hearing us talk today, I want you to think, what are some signs my child, my the student in my class or whoever it is that you're dealing with might show or you have seen in the past when this kind of thing happens. There are physical signs sometimes, unexplained injuries, lost belongings. That's
Mhm.
a big one. I see that. I had a student that I
Mhm.
worked with that would always constantly didn't have their things, and God, there was another student taking it from them. Yeah, lost belongings, frequent headaches or stomach aches. I see this again with kids that are going to the nurse all the time, and I'll have a nurse go, I don't understand.
Mhm.
Why is this happening? And yes, sometimes it's a kid being a kid that doesn't want to be in class.
Right.
But, and again, with students on the spectrum, that students that are on that autism spectrum, it does come out in physical signs a
Mhm.
lot because of that inability sometimes to express something
Mhm.
verbally. So frequent headaches and stomach aches could be a sign. Emotional signs, increased anxiety, sadness, irritability. That's a
Mhm.
big one, and we misinterpret that often. And then emotional outbursts. Behavioral signs, school refusal. If you have a child and they love school, they go to school, they've always liked going to school, and then suddenly they don't want to go to
Yeah.
school. And it's not just I'm tired today. It's like I do not want to go. Or I don't want to go to that class or that one class they used to love. They just hate it and they
Mhm.
start failing. So school refusal, withdrawal, changes in sleep, increased stimming. And stimming is, those repeated behaviors somebody does to help settle
Yeah.
themselves. And a loss of interest in activities. So things they used to love, they no longer love. Bullying, also known as harassment, involves. Oh, this is yours,
No, that's
actually,
good. We're
Roger.
good. We're
Sorry,
good.
I was just
No, that's
rolling
good. Just
along.
roll on. So,
But yeah, go ahead. It involves
so
persistent.
one of the complications that occurs in a workplace is bullying sometimes in the workplace can also be known as harassment. There's a fine line. But what it does do is it involves a persistent, and I think this is important to just articulate the words here, health endangering personal abuse that humiliates and demeans a person. And a lot of the work here that Matt and I will refer to today comes from the Campaign Against Workplace Bullying, which has been around now for a number of years. And this was done originally by Gary and Ruth Namey and their work in the original book that sort of like was a textbook, if you will, called The Bully at Work, which has now been revised and edited several times. It's still a very powerful book. And it still brings forth a couple of these really important things here. So bottom line, not dissimilar to what Matt just talked about related to bullying in the school environment. It's a harmful mistreatment of an employee or by one or more employees. And one of the tragedies in a workplace is that people frequently pile on and continue to join in and don't support the adult who may be the one who's experiencing the mistreatment in the workplace. Other things included in this are something that often doesn't get mentioned as much in the school environment is just work interference or even sabotaging someone's work, especially if there is a power disparity going on in that particular relationship. Or it can be any other combination of the patterns of these things you see. Workplace bullying is different from constructive criticism or conflict. Bullying has the persistent factor to it, and it focuses on a person rather than a task. The recipient of the targeted behavior feels the complete powerlessness in the ability to get this behavior stopped. And worst of all, employees who are experiencing bullying find that it's just really hard to explain and it's hard to stop. And that's also true of young people in the school environment. Sometimes it's just really hard to explain
Yeah.
what's happening in terms of trying to describe this to someone who's in charge, either classroom teacher, administrator, or for that matter, a supervisor in the workplace. So people are just forced to sort of suffer through it, if you will. An important statement here. Bullying is not automatically illegal. As a matter of fact, there is no federal statute that prohibits bullying. There are state laws and policies, and there are federal pieces that we'll look at in just a second. But technically speaking, there is not a federal statute that says bullying is illegal. However, bullying behaviors behaviors associated with bullying often overlap into that arena of harassment or bias, which are illegal and are protected by the Office of Civil Rights, particularly as it relates to issues of discrimination on the basis of race, color. Title VII really focuses on the issue of religion, and then sex or national origin. And legal action can be taken if, in fact, those start to happen. And by the way, that's also true for the school environment as well as the workplace. So in the workplace, the question mark becomes, are the civil rights of a targeted individual becoming violated? Are they violated under Title VI, just mentioned? Are they also violated under Title IX, under the issue that prohibits sexual discrimination? And an important distinction here, there is a specific definition for sexual harassment and sexual discrimination, but in Title IX, that falls under a much broader umbrella, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in general, which would also include gender as well. And then finally, and Matt will talk a bit more about this as it relates to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and Title II of the ADA of 1990, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability, or, if you will, exceptionality. So those are critical issues as it relates to workplace and school bullying, but particularly as it relates to the issue of workplace. And Matt?
Yeah, so let's talk specifically about, people, students, kids that are on the autism spectrum. Research says that 1 in 44, or 2.3%, identified with ASD in Tennessee. Are identified
Yes.
with, sorry, I said that wrong. 1 in 36 CDC nationwide. In the Tennessee school system, 15% are identified in Tennessee school system as being on the spectrum. According to many research studies, over 60% of autistic individuals experience bullying. That's a high number.
Yes.
And so that's a significant thing. A few more words about that. Bullying and social exclusion are not unusual experiences, particularly for children with medical or developmental issues. And it's clear that isolated children who lack social skills are at increased risk for bullying. And I think we all see that. When somebody has difficulty explaining things verbally in particular, or they don't understand social cues maybe in the way that others do sometimes, or they just feel isolated. They feel different, that they're just more at risk. Children with ASD with characteristic social deficits are especially vulnerable. And it's not hard for parents of children on the autism spectrum to imagine these scenarios. So let me just throw a few out. Their child's inability to read those social signs that someone doesn't have him or her best interest at heart. That eagerness to have a friendship or relationship sometimes overshadows where they don't see the difference sometimes between healthy behaviors or toxic behaviors. Is this person really doing what's best for me? The eagerness to please that can make him or her easy to manipulate. The tendency to say what he or she thinks without a full understanding of consequences. I see it all the time. It's that, that little mechanism maybe that stops you from saying some things sometimes. It's just, what do we call it? Disarming honesty sometimes comes out. So, question, how can a child recognize potential bullying when they lack the ability to see so many of the clues? The hard edge of mounting frustration or sarcasm in the tone of a voice. The smug look of a popular girl asking him out on a date or on a dare. The friend who persuades him to unknowingly commit an offense that brings on discipline from the teacher. I can think of at least one student right now that was a huge issue in K through 8 school I was working with, where they were actually setting him up to do things in class. And in his mind, he was doing that They're my friends. We're
Yeah.
doing something that's funny, and really they did not have his best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And the teacher didn't get it, and I had to sit down with that teacher and really explain what was going on. And through that discussion and bringing parents in, we were able to find a solution. And we were actually disciplined the other students that were involved. But had somebody not been there to advocate for
Yes,
that student would have
right.
gone on
That's
and
right.
on. And that's why you'll see me later on today, and I know Roger will too, talking about learning to be an advocate
Mhm.
for your child in the best way possible. Because the truth is, even in schools, they don't fully understand what is going on sometimes with a student that's on the autism spectrum.
And you know, Matt said something extremely important on the first slide today in that questionnaire, the survey, that the majority of kids really want to do the right
Yes,
thing.
they do.
They do. They want to. The challenge is if they can overcome that pressure to step outside the box from what other peers may do and advocate, then not only do parents have to advocate, but also kids need to advocate as well. But we can't make peers sort of, if you will, little mini saviors, if you will, because they need adult support in order, kids do, to advocate for other kids. And they can't do it without adult leadership in the
Yep.
building, because adults ultimately, at the end of the day, set the parameters for school climate. And colleagues in a workplace set the parameters for a good workplace culture as well. So, you know, that's one of the important pieces here, is never forgetting, and I think it's so important, the goodness of most kids in the school environment that want to do the right thing. They don't wake up every day going, who am I going to harm today? They wake up thinking, how can I just do the best I can today, get through my own experiences, and also, when and called upon, help someone who may be in need. And Matt will talk a little bit more about empathy in just a few minutes.
Yeah, and real quick, just because you triggered something
Yeah.
there, that includes kids too that sometimes participate in the bullying,
Yes.
but they're followers.
Absolutely.
You know, they don't, they still feel guilty about it, or they're not unsure. Those are the kids we really want to reach out to and try to get them to be advocates as well.
Yep.
And I just want to read this right here. The inability of children with autism to stand up for themselves, and ease with which they can be reduced to tears of rage or frustration by others, makes them "quote unquote" perfect victims.
Yes.
And part of that is that tendency to quickly react reactively with out of frustration. And with bullying, we know that it's like a million little cuts. It's going on over and over and over and over, and that frustration is building and building and building, and then they reduce.
Yeah.
You know, they get reduced to finally they blow up. You know, and the ease it happens. Another quote here from Hallen, which is in 2004: often they are unclear if they're being bullied, or if what is happening is their own fault. A lot of confusion there about fault and blame on them, because again, they don't have someone they can process that with sometimes.
Which is true in a workplace as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, that adults with adults autism spectrum often have the exact same scenario here as kids do in the workplace situation. Again, you know, we're calling upon you as listeners today and with us in this to really strongly set the parameters for advocating, because there's nothing like advocacy that can work in helping address this issue. Never quit being an advocate, because that's the one thing that will guarantee at least your voice being heard. And you may go back and knock on that same door a million times, but don't quit knocking, because eventually somebody hears. So keep advocating along the way.
Persistence, right?
Mhm.
Many children who are bullied do not report it to parents or other adults. That's what I said earlier. I did mention they do sometimes talk to adults, but it really is mostly peers. In addition to this general tendency not to tell, children with ASD may be nonverbal, and so unable to communicate that they are being bullied. Or they may have fluent language skills, this one's so important, but be unable to interpret the situation. And I will add, or the inability to explain the situation. So, you know, again, that's why we call it a spectrum. There's people throughout that entire spectrum on the ASD, and so there's several barriers here. Young people with autism are significantly more likely to be bullied frequently, with some research showing nearly 1 in 2 pupils with autism at risk of being a target of physical, verbal, or relational school bullying. I want you to, 1 in 2. It is a much higher rate than we will see overall. And it's for all those reasons that we've gone over in the last slides going on here. According to a recent survey carried out by Ambitious about Autism, they found that 75% of the young people with autism that they surveyed have experienced bullying behaviors, and only half of young people said they felt safe at school.
Yes.
Man, only half of young people that were surveyed said they actually feel safe at school.
So obviously, we want to do everything we can to continue to advocate for a positive school culture and a positive school climate where kids do feel safe. That's one of those things that we would love to see the statistics drastically reduced on that, that 5% of kids don't feel safe at school,
Right.
rather, or 0% of kids are struggling with safety at school.
Yeah. And I will say, I over the last 5 or 6 years, I've seen a definite shift.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely different. It is getting better, but it's not there. So according to CHOP, which was a hospital in Philadelphia, they did their Department of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. That's a mouthful. Their providers, the top 5 contributing factors to bullying of children with high functioning ASD are difficult. Again, we're seeing a lot of patterns here, right? Difficulties reading social cues, difficulty understanding common social conventions. That would include sarcasm, not really understanding that or understanding some of those jokes that some kids tell, not noticing or understanding the intentions of others, taking things way too literally. Gosh, I know any parents out there of a student on the spectrum will say amen to that. I mean, taking things just absolutely literally. In my counseling work, I really back up my language sometimes and go, okay, I need to make sure I'm not saying something where I'm saying it rhetorically or metaphorically, because I help teachers understand this. You need to be more direct and more explanatory in your language and more actually direct in terms of what you say. And then trouble entering peer groups. And that initial hello is so difficult. So difficult for all the reasons we've talked about.
And as Matt mentioned, sarcasm, it's not just true ASD, it's also true that sarcasm is not really a developmentally distinguishable issue for children. Not just ASD, but children in general don't really pick up sarcasm very well. It's not developmentally appropriate. So adults using sarcasm with kids in general, particularly educators, teachers, administrators, and whatnot, those are things that if you see it and you spot it, say something about it, because kids just don't get those social cues from adults who use sarcasm and maybe even cynicism to some degree as well.
Sarcasm can be very
painful, very costly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is actually they did some responses from children who have experienced this, and this phrase right here is just stuck out in my head. It's something we know, but when you see it in writing, the young people felt that this made them stand out, and that it also linked with a lack of understanding about their condition. In other words, people don't understand me, is what they're saying. This is one young person said, yes, because of miscommunication and lack of my social skills, lots of people may find them weird or get annoyed by them. People get annoyed by the way I sometimes act a little different, or what they consider weird. Or societal exclusion of neurodivergent individuals encourages bullying, as it determines anyone that's different is an outcast. So again, elementary, middle, certainly high school too, but elementary, middle, I always say, kids never realize they're different till they get to school. You know what I mean? I mean, whatever that is. And then all of a sudden they start realizing.
They realize it. And Matt just said something really important to build upon too, that when you start contributing factors beyond ASD and you include socioeconomics, you include other factors that cause young people to be more at risk for being targeted, if you will, such as even religion, immigrant status, other issues, then you start to get a really complex mix here of what causes a child to stand out, quote unquote, as different. You can kind of put the umbrella over that as anybody who stands out
Yes.
differently in any way, all of a sudden becomes much more likely to be targeted
Absolutely.
for their differences, if you will.
Absolutely. Another thing here, the young people felt that there was a general, again, a lack of understanding of autism in schools, and this contributed to negative attitudes towards them and lead to bullying. For example, people may find their self-soothing, I come across this constantly. People may find their self-soothing activities such as rocking or clapping or as strange. I have one student that would just make verbal noises sometimes because they don't fully understand the condition. And so, again, this comes down to education, right? Oftentimes, prejudice comes from ignorance.
Yep.
And so, just negative attitudes can develop because of a lack of understanding. And then there are just societal factors here. The young people with autism also raised issues around the school environment and lack of resources and support, as well as the lack of understanding, again, about autism. This is another quote right here. Schools not having the right resources to support them, therefore making school even harder than it should be. Therefore, meaning they have more meltdowns to prevent that we need to reverse the stigma and educate way more in schools. So what can we do as people that have people we love who are on the spectrum? We can teach children to recognize uncomfortable situations. In other words, be aware, help them use assertive statements. And that's so important because, gosh, for kids in general or adults in general, the difference between being aggressive in your language and just coming at somebody, or being passive where you're kind of like, yeah, well, I'm okay with this, it's all right, or whatever, and being assertive, which is where we teach our students, this is an old school counseling thing, but to use I feel statements. Like, I feel this way because I don't want you to do this, to make a request and to do it respectfully, but assertively. And that's something actually I would encourage you at home to practice, it with your child. How to ask a trusted adult for help. I really love schools that at the beginning of the year, actually teachers present, like in their classroom, we call them trauma-informed classrooms or whatever, but to say, hey, this is how you can come talk to me. This is how you can talk to me. But one of the important things that a parent can do is say, what adult in your building, in that school, do you trust? Guess what? It may not be a teacher. It may be the lunch lady. It might be the bus driver. It might be their coach. But help them to identify a trusted adult and then say, well, how could you talk to them? Sometimes they don't know how to approach the person. And then I know in the workplace, that's what you're going to talk about, which is, who do I talk to about this without feeling weird or awkward? And then report repeated mistreatment. Part of the problems with the bullying is teachers will go, that's so small. But it's not small when you add that it's been happening for 10 days in a row. It may be a small behavior, but it's repeated mistreatment that happens. And then, honestly, to trust their instincts. Trust that gut. Don't suppress that. So some examples of some, assertive statements. This sounds simple, but stop. I don't like that. Leave me alone, or I am going to get an adult. So again, those are just more assertive statements about this is what I'm going to do and what I do not like and what I want you to do.
And Matt, say a word just if you don't mind too, about the distinctions between like tattling, telling, and reporting, if 100%. You will. Just a couple of words about that.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to help teach, the person that is being bullied too, which is, there's a difference between tattling and reporting. I mean, I talk to kids about this all the time. Tattling is, I'm telling on somebody because I don't like them or I don't want them here and I want them to get in trouble. And if you talk to any kindergarten teacher, they hate it. But reporting is, you know what? I have done what I'm supposed to do here. and it's not getting better, and I need to report this behavior. And so you're reporting with the intention of getting help.
Yes.
So you're reporting to actually resolve a situation, not just to make it worse or to get back at somebody.
And that's safety. Matt just
It's
talked about
safety.
safety just a minute ago, and reporting is about creating a safe
Yes, it
environment.
is. Yes.
No reporting, there's no chance for anybody to do anything. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't, if
They
the
don't
teacher
know.
doesn't know,
Right.
and I hear this a lot. Well, nobody's done anything to help my
Right.
student, my
Right.
child. And then when you venture down the road a little bit, it's like, well, nobody
No.
really told them. Yeah, and so if we can advocate again and help our children know
Yes.
how to talk to an adult and tell them, or who to talk to, and maybe a school counselor or a counselor like me that's in the building, a mental health person, then there's more likely that something's going to be done.
And by the way, that takes an enormous amount of courage and grace and wisdom, but courage for sure to know how to do
Yep.
that well. That's something adults struggle with as well, which we'll talk about in a second.
And then green flags and red flags about relationships. This is we could do a whole session on this, but helping to teach our children the difference between healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. You know, the green flag is they're respectful. Red flag, they make fun of you all the time. Of course, again, that's the difference between some buddies making fun, but they're, where it's equal. But honestly, when we're talking about ASD, if their friends are constantly making fun of them, that's a red flag. One, the green flag is they're inclusive. The other is they pressure you. They use threats. Green flag is they're honest with them. They tell them the truth. And then finally, they accept differences. Red flags are people may use threats. They exclude you intentionally, or they only want something from you. So that's a hard one. That's a really hard one because somebody that's so eager for relationship or friendship will overlook that. Well, the only time they ever talk to me is when they want me to do something for them. Adults need to learn that.
Yes.
Too.
Great
But,
cues
yeah.
for developing friendships.
Very good.
Great
Very
cues
good.
for friendship skills.
So you can help your child learn ways to manage bullying and to build their coping skills. And I kind of bullet pointed a bunch here, but again, you can look into this even more. And as you're listening to this, I hope you're maybe taking some notes of, what, I could do this at home, or I could help. One is to teach them to adjust their responses according to the severity of what is happening. So in other words, when a child is bothering them versus bullying them. Gosh, this is a hard one. Again, I hate to keep referencing my counselor. I do a lot of work with students about this. The difference between somebody that's intentionally bullying you and just kind of irritating you, because there are kids that irritate you in the classroom. So helping, doing some role playing at home about to adjust our response, that we don't just yell at somebody because they're bugging us. But at the same time, if somebody's bullying us, our response should be a little more strong and a little more firm. You need to stop. I'm going to go get help. And here's what I was just talking about: role playing, how to speak up assertively. Hey, stop, leave me alone. Practicing the words your child can use to get help from adults. I want you to really write that one down.
Yeah, that's important.
Really, and even think of yourself. What words can you use to help that will actually help get help? Help get help. Instead of just kind of giving a complaint or sounding like I'm just kind of I'm just saying things because I don't like them. But practice words that can actually get help from the adults. You can also help your child build their self-advocacy skills, which is what Roger and I have been talking about, by offering them scripted phrases they can use. I know it sounds weird to say scripted phrases, but man, it's so true. So some of those phrases is, like, everyone's mind works a little bit differently. Wouldn't it be great if a student could say, sometimes my mind just works a little differently? Wow. That's an adult skill right there. I just get overwhelmed, but I'm working on it. These kinds of things take more time for me to figure out. I wish, and I want us to help students learn how to say to a teacher or to an adult. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes me a little more time. Can you give me just a little more time and I'll figure it out? Can you help me figure it out? Really great phrases there. Really great phrases. So I want you to work with the young people to understand their challenges and needs and what support they can find most helpful. So I do want you to also talk with your child. Ask them, what are some of your challenges? What do you feel is hard for you?
Mhm.
You know, do you ever stop to really ask that? We assume, and their problem or their challenge might be completely different than what we think it is. It might be, I don't know how to say hello to a new group of people. It scares me. So honestly, take the time to ask your child, you know, what do you think are some of the challenges? And then support children with autism to be themselves. Gosh, rather again, teach that to every child. Rather than feeling they must change or fit in to be like others, give them time to process ideas and questions and to learn social skills together. So they don't have to look or act or be like everyone else. You know, and if they start acting more like themselves, they might find out there are other students
Hmm.
that feel the same way, but for different reasons. Like Roger said, it could be, well, I don't have the right clothes to wear because we don't have any money.
Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah,
I look different,
right.
or I'm from a different city, or I just moved here from another school. So it's the same for our students, but we know that kids, you know, ASD, they struggle a little more with that because
Yeah.
they so much often want to be like part of that group, and so they'll try to modify who they are, which honestly there's a beauty in who they are,
Hmm.
and we want to really encourage them just be yourselves, and people will, the right people will accept you for
Well
who you
said.
are.
You know, back to the questionnaire that Matt started the morning with.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of schools have used the Alveus Bullying Prevention Questionnaire for years and years and years. One more comment, just quickly about the data from that. In virtually every school that Matt and I have ever worked with and trained, and we have done a lot over the last 20 years, kids in always, I mean, this is an always report elementary schools anywhere from 90 to 94 to 95% of kids feel a degree of empathy in their schools for kids who are targeted and bullied. It drops a little in middle school, it drops a little in high school, but still somewhere around 75 to 80% of kids express empathy for kids who are being harmed. The challenge is to move that needle for the kids who actually do something about it, which generally results in about 30 to 40% of kids who say, I really want to help. Okay. And I'm going to go back, Matt, because I think this
Yeah.
bullet points here at the bottom of that slide that
Mm.
you read and talked about. Wouldn't it be great if the world in which we lived found those three things to be true all the time?
Yes.
To me, that's the issue of empathy development is young people who can find it in themselves to support young people who are willing to speak truth into their lives, into other lives as a result of saying those kind of things. Those are such amazing bullet points. I hope you guys don't forget to remember to work through those phrases and slogans to help
Yeah,
our young
absolutely.
people. Those are so powerful.
Absolutely. All right, so this is for parents. Gosh, this is a hard one, especially when, like Roger was saying, sometimes you knock on 1,000 doors before
Yeah.
one opens, and we shouldn't accept that.
Right.
But um, this first phrase, the worst thing to tell somebody, stay calm. But when we think about that, really honestly, people will listen to us more if we're calm.
Yep.
So staying calm, listen first. This is when you're talking with the students. Um, Stay calm and listen first. Validate feelings. In other words, your first instinct might be, well, why does that bother you so much? Or why are you letting them get to you?
Mm.
Valid thoughts, but not valid in that moment to say. In other words, so if a student's like, well, somebody made fun of me because I don't know, I tap on the table too much. Um, what should happen there is for you to go, man, you know, I hear that.
Mm.
That must be, I mean, how does that feel to you? Oh yeah, it's difficult. So like mirroring or validating how they feel as valid feelings. So their feeling might be different than the feeling you might have in the same situation, but validate those feelings first. Then, only then do we start gathering facts. So again, the first thing is to be calm, to listen and not just not listening with what am I going to respond to
Yeah.
my child,
Yeah.
but listening to go, whoa, what am I hearing here? What's really bothering them? And what is their feelings? And then go, let's get some facts together. If you want to advocate in the school and it's something that's ongoing at school, then we want to document incidents.
Mhm.
Again, this goes back to the fact that sometimes bullying, when you take individual incidents, seems small, but when you have 10 small incidents, they add up to
Yeah.
big incidents. And like it or not, students need, teachers need documentation. Administrations need
Mhm.
documentations. So again, validate your child's feelings, gather some facts, and when you're gathering facts, try to keep opinion out of that,
Mhm.
so that when you go to the school, you don't have to justify, well, I just think that's happening. No, these are things I know are happening. Document incidents as they happen, then contact school staff and follow up consistently. If you have notified an administration or a school counselor, I don't wait a week to follow up.
Right.
I give 24 hours basically the next day. Follow up consistently. Now, you don't need to make a call every single day unless, well, nothing has been responded to. But yeah, you contact the school staff and follow up consistently. By the way, I don't know about every school, but I know, like, for instance, the county I do most of my work with, and I'm pretty sure most of Tennessee, every school has a bullying protocol.
Absolutely.
And so they have to. And so find out in the bullying protocol of your school who are the point people.
Yes.
And there usually is a point person. And they'll say, well, the school counselor is that person. Or no, the assistant principal is that person.
Or a
Often
dean of
assistant
students or
principal, sorry,
something
dean
like
of
that. Yeah.
students. Yeah. So find out who that point person is, so you're not contacting a person that's really not in the cycle as much.
And once a report is made, I'm glad you brought that
Yeah.
up, Matt. A school, by virtue of state policy, has 48 hours to begin the investigation.
Mm.
So that's mandated in Tennessee Code Annotated policy. So to Matt's point, they may not get on it in the first 24,
Right.
okay, but they've got to investigate it if you report bullying within the first 48 hours to begin that investigation.
That's a great point there. And we will go into, like, there are legal obligations that the
Yes,
school has.
absolutely.
And I want to just really quickly avoid immediately telling a child to ignore
Here,
it.
here.
Just avoid that. All right, ask specific questions. This is so important. This is similar to what we teach teachers in restorative practices.
Yes.
About how do we actually discipline with intention or get things done. So ask specific questions. What happened? Tell me exactly what happened. Who witnessed it? Was there anybody else around? Oh yeah, there were other kids around, and whatever. What actions were taken? So that's important to kind of note. And again, we're not gathering information so we can go after a school,
Right.
but we're gathering information to go, okay, so what actions have already been taken, or what is happening? How will safety be monitored? Great follow-up question. I want you, if you have to go into a meeting at the school about your child being bullied, that one of the key questions you ask is, after we're done with this meeting,
Yes.
how will the safety be monitored?
What's the plan?
What's the plan? What are the actual action steps? Not, we're going to just talk about this. What are the action steps in that classroom or in the school that are going to happen? And then when can we follow up? Do not leave it as that first meeting. And a follow-up can be a phone call. It doesn't have to be another in person, but when, not will we follow up? When will we follow up? And I want to emphasize this last thing. Written communication is good whenever possible. Again, yes, because sometimes this might turn into a legal issue or an escalated issue. But really, also, it's great to have written communication, because you can go, you know what, I didn't tell them this.
Yeah.
Or they did say this and I forgot about that, or whatever. And so written communication, think about even at your own job, or you're incredibly important for the workplace stuff Roger's going to talk about. But written communication is good, honestly, just for your own memory, but also to have a paper trail, so to speak. Federal laws. All right. So, Roger, do you want to hit this one?
I'll hit this one just to remind us that we've talked about this, that there is no federal law directly, quote, addressing bullying. But remember, it overlaps with discriminatory harassment, especially when it's based upon one of those civil rights issues, either Title VI, Title IX, or 504, and Matt's going to speak one more time, just a little bit about ADA, about the IEP. So remember, bullying can cross into that realm of harassment, and it particularly when it involves a protected class. And a protected class would be based upon Title VI, race, disability, ethnicity, and then sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, and then finally children and or adults with exceptionalities. So remember, that's the line. If it involves protected class, that bullying issue can quickly cross into that particular realm of those issues. Remember, and this is, I don't think it's anywhere in any of our material, but that when you look at this issue about harassment, don't forget, harassment is defined oftentimes by the degree of severity, its frequency as well. And remember, it doesn't have to meet all the standards. Anything can be, if it's severe enough, if it's frequent enough, it can cross into that line of harassment from bullying. And that's a very difficult distinction, by the way, for schools, which is why, back to the investigation piece, it may take a minute to figure out what's really going on in the context of a school investigation, because oftentimes it's insidious. Kids don't often come forth with the truth, especially the witnesses and those kind of things, because nobody, of course, wants to be a snitch. Okay, so it's really difficult. Have some grace for the investigations that take place, but remember, they got to begin it, and you've got to know, and they're mandated to tell you what happened with the investigation as it goes forward.
So I won't really quickly about IEP. So an IEP is not a weapon,
Right.
but it is an incredibly essential tool. And it is one that we do need to use, especially when we're advocating or dealing with issues. So an IEP is a direct, and this is so true. An IEP is a direct opportunity to proactively prevent bullying. I don't know if you ever thought about it that way, but an IEP in place is actually a great preventative tool. Parents and other IEP team members should work together to make the IEP reflect the child's unique needs in school, including the need to be safe from bullying. And I want to stop there for a second. I see so many IEPs that are vague. When you are in an IEP meeting, make sure that you go in with certain issues you want, if you can, to be in that IEP.
Yeah.
And if bullying has been a past issue, and it's because, you know, my child just doesn't pick up on these social cues, and they're more compliant with the way kids might treat them, and they let these things happen. Can we put something in the IEP that helps preserve their safety and helps preserve them in that IEP that helps avoid bullying or to at least deal with bullying?
Absolutely.
So the IEP is important. I
Very
would place
important.
504 in there too.
Yes,
you know,
good.
which
I'm glad you
falls
did.
in there.
Yep.
So the IEP goals can be established to help your child cope with bullying or teasing they may encounter at school. A sample IEP goal could be identify and practice direct and indirect ways to react to, handle, and lessen the effects of bullying behavior. You should copy and paste that right there. And what a great goal that is to put into an IEP, because that also is a social skill they might want to learn throughout the year. What a great action skill there. But also, what a great way to prevent bullying or to deal with bullying. In an IEP, parents can, I don't know if you know this, you can request supplementary aids and services and program modifications or supports, including hallway or playground monitoring by staff. In other words, that's that whole thing of who's going to preserve the safety. Allowing your child to leave class early to avoid hallway encounters. I have 4 or 5 students I work with throughout kindergarten up to high school that actually leave class 2 minutes early just to avoid that hallway stuff. Using social stories to help your child understand difficult situations when they occur. I love that. A no questions asked procedure for your child to remove themselves from a situation where bullying behavior occurs.
Yes.
So in other words, the student doesn't have to raise their hand and say, I can't handle it right now, I'm being bullied. They just can give some sort of signal or whatever that says, I need to walk out in the hallway.
Yep.
I know one procedure at the high school that they use at one that I work in is an envelope system where they actually have a blank envelope. And if a student needs a break, there's a signal, and they are delivering an envelope up to the main office,
Yes.
and nobody knows
Right.
why they needed to leave for just about 3 or 4 minutes, and then they come back. So I love the no questions asked procedure. So in an IEP, obviously we're not going to put so many things in there that the school's hands are so
Right.
tied they don't know what to do. But little bullet points that really help go, okay, I feel good about the fact that we have something in place that is actually practical. That's
Mhm.
gonna help my child, for better term, survive middle school.
Yeah.
To get through,
Right, absolutely.
So great tool is the IEP. Don't let that IEP pass you by
Mhm.
when you have one in
Important.
place. Research consistently shows that children do better when they have strong family support, at least one trusted adult. So important again. We call it the one. Who's your
Yes.
one?
Mm.
I ask kids all the time, who is your one? Positive peer relationships. And again, this could be one or two. Opportunities for success. In other words, a school environment where they feel like they can succeed, and a strong self identity. So again, the more we can help our kids go, you know what? I don't care that this is different, quote unquote, or whatever. I feel good about myself.
Yeah,
I actually
absolutely.
like who I am most of the time.
Yep. Absolutely.
So a strong self identity.
Mm.
So some questions for you to think about. What strengths does your child bring to relationships? Specifically to relationships. Think about that today. If you've got something in front of you writing, jot down what are some of the strengths your child has, and then reinforce those strengths. Let's not always focus on deficiencies
Mhm.
or things that they lack. Let's build up their assets rather than always trying to prevent the negativity on the other side of it. How does your child know they can come to you? Have you ever thought about that? Does your own kid even know
Mm.
what's the best way to come to you? When's the best time to come to you? We take for granted because we're with them all the time at
Yeah.
home. But
Yeah.
honestly, I think of myself in high school. I wouldn't have gone to my mom with a problem,
Right.
And so, how does your child know they can come to you? Who are 3 trusted adults in your child's life? This is so important. It should be at least one person outside your immediate household.
Mhm.
So somebody that's trusted, whether that's a coach, a youth leader, a pastor, a teacher, somebody, a neighbor that you trust as well, a trusted adult that your child can go talk to. And what is one action that you can take this week to strengthen your child's support network? So what is one action you can take in the next 7 days that will help support your child or build, your child's support network?
Mm.
So we're not just doing everything for them. We're actually trying to create an environment where they can do for themselves.
Yes. We're doing it with them.
With them.
Absolutely.
Not to them. Absolutely. All right.
Matt, great info. And
Yeah.
this is so really important. And this this next slide was just a quick visual of cyberbullying as it relates to some great research. I'm going to throw out the website now. Cyberbullying.org is probably one of the most up-to-date, fresh, current websites with good information, research, as well as practical tip sheets for parents and teachers and community members around the issue of both bullying and cyberbullying. It's a great website. And so you can see sort of the issue of what's happened, excuse me, what's happened with cyberbullying, those kids who report being cyberbullied and those who do it, if you will, those offending on the lower line, those who are targeted and victimized at the top line. What's really important in this, those are kids who have ever had it happen to them in their lifetime, not kids who report it being happening daily or anything like that. This is lifetime prevalence. So when you look at it, we still drop back. And I know this is hard to believe because of everything we hear in media all the time about this, but still only about 10% or less of kids are actually involved in the equation of being bullied or cyberbullied on a regular basis. But when it comes to lifetime, it's a much higher degree of percentage. And that's what this statistic shows. Okay. So, there's a lot of information that we've packed into the first part of this. So if you need a break, this is a great time to pause the video. So, but we're going to get back and I'm going to continue here with just some facts about and solutions about workplace bullying. Remembering that there's so much similarity between school-based and workplace bullying. Kids are going to go back to school. We hope this video is going to be helpful to you as you begin the 26-27 school year. If your children are in school, or if they're not, if they're out of school, the tips and here are tremendously powerful. I hope these next things will be helpful for you in the workplace. So, adults, getting ignored, put down, left out, talked about, or humiliated are issues that show up as workplace bullying issues. And remember, it tends to be subtle in the workplace. When men bully, it's often more aggressive or physical in the workplace. And when women do it, it might be more backhanded, if you will. And this comes from No Job is Worth This by Beverly Peterson, also validated by the research and work of Gary and Ruth Namey that I mentioned early on. So generally speaking, remember, it's always important to remember generalities versus specifics when it comes to like men and women. Doesn't mean men don't do more subtle things and women don't do more physical things, but generally speaking, if you would. Some signs that somebody has been bullied in the workplace, very emotional. The same thing, look what Matt said earlier, physical impacts by the person who's being bullied in the workplace, stomach aches when seeing the building entrance. I mean, there's nothing like pulling in the parking lot and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I got to go into that place again today, which is why Beverly Peterson wrote that book. This job really isn't worth it, okay? Being stressed out from the abusive behavior, talking about stress claims and workman's compensation insurance, or talking about taking SDI time off from workplace abuse, and then a noticeable change from maybe a bubbly sort of affect to a more morose tone and mood in the workplace. It's just some general signs of those who've been targeted in the workplace. Some other forms of targeting: singling out behavior, disparaging comments and mistreatment, events of harassment, which can be very apparent in cases involving employees with exceptionalities. If you know someone that's temporarily experiencing some sort of an exceptionality, the supervisor assigning work against doctor's ordered restrictions. So knowing what those things are, okay? And I love the quote from Gary and Ruth Namey here. These are just some signs that someone's been bullied, abused, or that we've seen, that they've seen over the years. It's just a start, since some bullies and abusers can be extremely creative and manipulative as how they go about abusing or targeting a fellow colleague in the workplace. Another way that adults bully in the workplace is by, specifically around supervisory issues here, yelling at the employee, slamming doors, slamming papers, books on a table or desk. And remember, there's a huge startle effect that often occurs when someone is being harmed like that. Gaslighting events, working sabotage as abusive behavior, work sabotage, somebody taking credit for something that they didn't do, that they know they can sabotage someone who may not be able to articulate as effectively as someone else in a workplace, that they're being sabotaged. Maybe they don't even know they're being sabotaged, which is even more insidious and complicated. Isolation of the employee is workplace abuse, and the silent treatment, leaving people out and then giving you messages through a third party. So that whole deal of triangulation and, A tells B, who tells C, rather than direct communication in the workplace. A couple of other examples here: unwarranted or invalid criticism. Um, you know, Candidly, Matt's been here long enough at STARS that years ago we had some workplace issues in our own environment before we really took a hard look at this, and had some leadership folks who really took opportunities to criticize over absolutely nothing. Thank goodness that situation resolved itself, that person's no longer with us. But they took advantage of opportunities to use their power, if you will, to harm other people. And in my opinion, it was intentional, not
Mm.
unintentional. Okay. Blaming without factual justification. So just operating on feelings and no facts. Being treated differently than the rest of your work group. I remember we had one employee here during this particular time that would often complain about that they were specifically left out of workplace tasks, of opportunities to advance, of opportunities to grow, even when it came to like professional development opportunities. And I'm being transparent with you here because I can tell you today, STARS has been one of the top workplaces by the Nashville Tennessean for the past 14 years. But let me tell you, before that, we took deliberate steps to do something about it. We had bullying in our own workplace environment, and we did something about it because we became aware, cognizant, and thank God there were people who advocated to leadership here to say, y'all need to take a look at this because this is not okay. And so I think confidence and courage in the workplace is really tough, okay? But it takes it in order to bring forth what's really going on in the workplace. We'll talk just a second more about getting some help to do that. Social isolation, being shouted at, humiliated, excessive monitoring or micromanaging, or being excessively left alone so that one is sort of being sabotaged intentionally and letting people fail. Okay. And then being given work that has unrealistic deadlines or timelines on it. Those are some great remembrances and examples of the way workplace bullying occurs. The consequences of workplace bullying, this is a pretty good graph that sort of shows it. Workplace bullying can occur and cause consequences to the individual through financial, family and social, through professional and career opportunities, through physical health, as well as through mental health. And not dissimilar to kids in school, one of the greatest issues for for adults in a workplace who are targeted, specifically adults with exceptionalities, is this low level of just anxiety and depression, stress, and a lower sense of self-worth. I like the word self-worth more than self-esteem, self-value rather than self-esteem, or just the leadership, which can cause post-traumatic stress. You know, there's a great quote that says, a brain in pain cannot retain. When you look at this, if you've got a workplace employee who's being constantly harassed, bullied, and whatnot, that brain ends up being in a traumatic place. And a traumatic brain does not retain what even the more basic things of the workplace requirements are, skills, jobs, those kind of things. So major consequences can occur. Here's what bullying in the workplace requires. It requires secrecy, shame, and silent witnesses. Those three things are absolutely necessary in the workplace for bullying to continue. Secrecy, shame, and silent witnesses. You can stop them by cutting off their life support, by confronting the issues that occur. There are three types of basic bullying in the workplace. There's the chronic bully who's just mean, cruel, nasty. There's the substance abuse bullying who may have a literal chemical imbalance or utilization of substances to medicate pain or discomfort and truly is substance abusive, substance misuse, has a diagnostic issue related to truly needing treatment for their substance abuse. And then there's this opportunistic bully. These are the kind that are the most likely to encounter at work. These are the climbers who will overstep anybody just to get to the top of the pecking order, and they'll do virtually anything to overcome. That's where sabotaging comes in. And then there's the accidental bully in the workplace who is really benign. They don't mean to do something. They may say something or do something cruel or hurtful, but really didn't mean to do it. And if confronted about it or challenged about it, they immediately go into their own shame and guilt about it and confess, I did not mean to harm you in that way. And that goes back to what Matt talked about, that distinction between conflict and bullying. Sometimes that just is an unintentional act that was really sort of born out of insecurities, other issues in their own life, said something inappropriate, apologized for it, and it really was not meant to cause harm. Whereas these other two, the mean and nasty person and the opportunistic, are oftentimes intentionally done. Again, back to that power imbalance. Here's a great little quiz you can take. Are you being bullied at work? 12 telltale signs and what to do about it from 6wise.com. That's 6wise.com. A great little questionnaire, 12 telltale signs. Take a look at it when you get a minute and see how, if any of those issues might impact you. So what can be done about it? Well, one thing for sure, and again, this is a challenge because we're talking about oftentimes and having family members in my own life, adult family members who are high functioning, autism spectrum disorder, on that spectrum, oftentimes were in fact unaware, and when interviewing, that they were being dazzled by impressive mission statements, by titles and awards. But when doing some research about it, and then checking out with their spouse about the work environment, found out, yeah, this is maybe not the right place for me to be. Talk to other employees and former employees, if you know any about the company's management style. As one of my good friends, a therapist, a personal therapist to me, said years ago, be a good consumer when you're looking for the right job. Take into account what that place is really like. Ask the employee for a copy of their policies and read it carefully, taking note of their policies on turnover, sick leave usage, dismissal, grievance procedures, early retirements, ill health retirements, and then suspension or other disciplinary procedures. I included the word wisdom over here because this does take wisdom and discernment, which means that adults with exceptionalities may require advocacy themselves in order to mitigate a complicated workplace environment, because they can be extremely insidious in terms of the way they manage themselves and represent themselves to potential employees. All right, so here's some steps. Step one, name it, legitimize yourself. Naming the behaviors you're confronted with, bullying and emotional abuse, is a first step to realizing that the bullying is real and it should be stopped. So you got to legitimize it, like what Matt's been talking about with the young people. Step two, if you need to take some time off to heal and launch a counterattack, do it. Take care of your physical and mental well-being. While on leave, begin researching into your legal options, not dissimilar to what a parent would do if they're considering situations where they think their child has been bullied or harassed. Okay, what are you going to do about it? What's this cost the company? What's it costing the company? Look for new possible positions. Remember, there's a 7 in 10 have a chance of losing their job by this, so by choice or termination. So remember, take time to heal, counterattack with a plan. And then number 3, expose the bullying. And I want to say more about that in just a second. This is a great reminder and complicated. To the extent possible, approach the highest level person in the company possible and present from a factual perspective. State your case to leadership about what's really going on. And if you've really got problems with your supervisor and there've been problems, you need to legitimize yourself in that by saying stick to your facts and not let your emotions get the best of you. Just like what Matt said, going into those issues with our own children and also in the work school environment. You may be giving the company just the reason it was looking for to dismiss somebody who was cruel and harmful. So, but you never know if you don't legitimize it, take time to heal, and expose the reality of the situation. Finally, recognize the problem. Understand that you don't have to put up with it. Document, keep a log, and don't just rely on HR to help. Most companies don't have bullying policies. Many don't. And they may side with the boss. HR, generally speaking, is a part of senior leadership in most corporate environments. So remember, don't just depend upon HR. okay, and report the problem to a manager. And as just articulated, find someone higher up, and Namey would suggest look for somebody one step above your immediate supervisor that you can report it to, because your supervisor is liable to minimize it and just negatively negatively respond to the situation and negate the situation altogether. So, some tips, do's and don'ts. Don't always trust HR. Don't ask the bully's boss to stop it. Don't tell your story from only an emotional angle. And do not share documentation at work with anyone other than who you need to share it with. Do not ask HR, the union management, to stop the bullying for you. Don't pay an attorney till you have to, and don't confide in anyone at work unless they have demonstrated loyalty in the past. In other words, do your homework, keep tabs on this, document well, so that when it comes time to legitimize yourself, you really do have a good case to make. Take a stand, get the help you need, fight back from the beginning. And again, it goes back to those messages, for instance, that Matt was saying with kids. Stop it. Realize that you should not back down, but do not become a bully yourself in the middle of that. Okay, so important, because it's easy to cross that line with adults. Okay,
Yeah. And then the comeback is, well, they were doing it too.
absolutely. Then you
Right.
just get with a he said,
He
she
said,
said,
he
or
said.
she said. Okay. Tell others that you trust what is happening. Tell others that you trust what's happening. It isn't okay. And constantly do reality checks with your others. Namey say, don't take any crap from anybody. Stand up to the bully. Stand up, provide support to others who are being annoyed by the bully's behavior. Challenge them more and stand up for your beliefs. And these are things that we sort of talk about with kids, but at the end of the day, kids can't really stand up and advocate for themselves all the time. And it's not dissimilar for adults in that we need those who we do trust to help advocate for us as adults in the workplace as well. Start confronting it earlier and take legal action, but if it's necessary. But remember, don't pay an attorney until you have to. What have gone to the operations or corporate office, the district manager, supervisor, or principal superintendent, or immediate manager? And remember, keep better records of not the bullying, but keep better records of the bullying incident. Sorry, missing a Y there in that particular slide. So 8 steps, the steps to topple tyrants. Solicit support, consult outside support, physician, therapists, solicit witness statements, confront the person who's harming you, file an internal complaint, prepare for the case again, revise your documentation, be clear with it, and the rule of 2 meetings. Only bother to make an internal case if you have the ear of someone, and it says here 2, Namey would also say 1 may be sufficient, someone 2 or more levels in the organization chart above the bully, and taking the case public if it's necessary to do it, because sometimes you have to. I'm going to reference a book for you that I didn't put in here, but it's a good old book to read. And it's called, pardon the language here, but I'm going to quote it. It's The No Asshole Rule by Robert Sutton. It is a tremendous book about workplace harmful behavior. And it talks about the essence of what it really means to have somebody who's just really a jerk as your boss. It's a great reference tool, and so many corporations and industries have now required their company leadership and managers, middle and above, to read the book, because companies that tolerate intolerant people and bullies eventually will lose their credibility, and it impacts businesses' bottom lines. It's a powerful book. Robert Sutton, he has several great books about the subject. So Matt, that leads us to this place. So we ask you, and we'll be glad to take questions from you as you fire them back to us. You have our addresses, our email addresses at the very beginning. What questions do you have that you'd like more information about with your children or in the workplace? And Matt and I are always willing to
Absolutely.
take questions from you.
Absolutely.
Matt, any closing?
No, I mean, I think as you can see, there's parallels, adults and children. There's just maybe some slightly different
Yeah.
ways we deal with it.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely.
Hey, y'all, thanks for allowing us. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
sharing just a minute so we can see you better. Thank you for allowing us to share information with you today. Always a pleasure to get to be with Matt and a pleasure to be with all of y'all. Hopefully it's helpful. Let us know if we can help. Thanks so much.
Thank you.